Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language and the final episode of season 4, because our seasons match I don't know what kind of calendar. We start in September, like school in my province, not where Katie's kids go to school, and maybe not where your kids go to school. But anyway, season 5 will start in September. So that means season 4 is ending now. The next few weeks, you're going to get some repeat episodes, which is always fun for us to pick some favorites from the past year. And if you've listened to them before, you can listen again, or you could share them with a friend, or you could take that opportunity to go and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, which would be fantastic because it's been a while since we've gotten a review. And if you listen to us, we would like to, or even if you just want to, like hit that little 5-star button, that's also super helpful because then people know that you're listening and that other people are listening to the podcast. And reviews are also super helpful too. If you don't think we're worth 5 stars, then, just skip that step. We don't need to know. Yeah. So Katie, last update until September. What do you want to tell us about what's going on in Iowa these days?
It's really hot and really humid. And once again, I had something and I forgot it. Regarding replayed episodes, everyone who's made soup knows that leftovers get better with a couple days of marinating, so I feel like some of our old episodes might be really primed for a re-listen. Mostly I'm distracted because I ate too many peaches like I do every year, and I gave myself a stomachache like I do every year, and once again this year I did not write down how many peaches it was that it took to give me a stomachache so that I could, subtract 1 or 2 from that total and find a safe number.
If you had to guess, how many peaches do you think it is that you have consumed and has now left you feeling gross?
Well, this is the problem, right? So I never eat a whole peach, just like, biting into it. Like, it's just not, it's messy. So I always slice them, which is fine. I've eaten probably in the last 4 days, 5 days, like 4 or 5 whole peaches sliced up. That's not really the problem. The problem is that today I was slicing peaches to freeze. And it is not entirely outside the realm of possibility that I've eaten at least another 5 or 6 peaches worth of peaches while slicing and freezing.
So that's somewhere in the range of the number.
I mean, I'd like to think that that's unlikely, but it's not outside the possibilities.
Got it. Yeah. You skipped lunch and breakfast and you've just been eating peaches today.
Yeah. And I had kettle corn for dinner last night, which might have been part of the problem because I had a peach with the kettle corn too. I was thinking today about all the sorts of foods that, like, if you could have an unlimited supply of this food at the very peak of its perfection, what that food would be for you. And for me, I think it's ripe peaches. And these aren't even that good of peaches. Like, they came from Missouri or South Carolina or something. They came on a truck and they spent a couple days on top of our chest freezer ripening. But I love them so much.
It's true. Because a peach at its best is really good. A peach any other time of year, I could take it or leave it.
No.
When they're like that weird mealy texture, or they never really ripen, or you cut into them and they might be the right texture, but they have no flavor. Yeah, like a peach at not peak is not really worth the effort. But yeah, when they're good, they're good.
These were definitely better than your average grocery store peach. But in high school, we went to a family reunion in North Carolina and bought a bag of peaches on the side of a road somewhere. And it was one of those situations where you're going to make yourself sick. You don't care that you're going to make yourself sick, and it is absolutely worth it, and you will still look back on it fondly.
And decades later, you're still thinking about it.
Obviously, at 44, I have not grown out of, it's been more than 25 years, and I still don't have enough self-control to not make myself sick. Making yourself sick with fresh peaches, like, I feel like is really a pretty minor vice. Otherwise, not much happening on the farm. Jim and the boy child and Jim's dad all went to a 3-day tractor show in Minnesota, which I think was a good time had by all.
And you did not have to or get to participate, which is the right word there.
The girl child and I stayed home and spent a fair amount of time swimming, and one of her cousins came over and they spent a lot of time cackling together. The cousin is 13 and the girl child is 8.5, so they're just enough of a gap to enjoy each other. For anyone who saw my video a few weeks ago about that hummingbird chasing me around the yard, he's back. Every time I go out to pick tomatoes or do anything in the garden, he flies up and just stares at me. The feeders are full, and he is still following me around the yard. So if I die mysteriously with like 5 million tiny, tiny puncture wounds, it'll be the hummingbird. So please avenge my death if that happens.
Got it. Yeah. Here's the evidence. Yeah.
Otherwise, not a whole hell of a lot. Starting to think about back to school. It's in less than a month now. So we're some of us are looking forward to that more than others of us, I guess. Eh, not a whole hell of a lot. How are things at your place, Arlene?
Well, similar weather, so we don't need to go over that. More heat warnings for the foreseeable future. And it's definitely starting to get drier. So we're not in a drought situation by any means, but the grass is definitely not growing the way it used to. So my lawn crew, which is my two teenage boys, might get a little bit of a break, or at least be able to extend the time between lawn cuttings in the next little while. Today's adventure was our new tractor that is still under warranty caught fire. So that was not ideal.
Oh, caught fire. That's not even like a little. How badly caught fire? Like a little bit of fire, or like we're just gonna stand here and watch it burn kind of fire?
The whole thing is not burnt out. Thankfully, it was one of our hired men was driving on the road and turned off the main road, and someone followed him and alerted him to the fact that there were flames shooting out the back of the tractor. And so a and then my husband went over to find them, and he said that there were a few good things. He brought a fire extinguisher, and the guy who was driving behind the tractor also had a fire extinguisher, so they were able to use those. The bystander also had some bottled water in his vehicle that they kept tossing at it because the battery kept sparking and catching back on fire. So even though the fire extinguisher had been used and were now empty.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but tractors, man, farming.
Yeah, exactly. And he said it was near someone's driveway where the grass had been cut in the ditches. So at least it wasn't, an imminent, start a larger fire situation. Although he said he was, watching his phone, kind of timing how long it took the volunteer firefighters to show up, and it was longer than you would want. So I mean, if it if it had really taken off, it definitely could have, the whole tractor could have gone up, but it didn't. We've had a few issues with this tractor already so far since acquiring it. So in a way, I think we're kind of hoping that it's a write off and that they don't repair it and send it back, because there's already been probably more repairs than you'd want for a new tractor that's less than 6 months old. So anyway, that's the fun story from today.
When you said new, I expected you to say under 5 years.
No, like new.
I live on a farm where our newest piece of equipment, our newest tractor, I think is older than I am. So, but when you say new and then you say 6 months, that's a very different.
Yes, this is, yeah. It has not been through harvest yet. It is, yeah.
I imagine that most of our listeners have a good concept of what a tractor costs, but if you don't, the answer is probably 3 times as much as you think it is. It seems to be pretty solid.
Yes. So, I mean, other good things were it wasn't pulling a piece of equipment. We are starting third cut hay today, but he was going over to another shop that we have on another road to go pick up a piece of equipment. So that was also good that it wasn't hitched to something that then had to get unhitched, or that thing would also catch on fire. So, positives all around, but yeah, still not ideal.
And thankfully, I imagine that no one was hurt since you have not mentioned that you're
No, that is the major, the major thing. No one was hurt, but yeah, not a fun way to spend a day.
Around here, we tend to, it seems like about once every harvest season, at least once, somebody's combine catches fire. And a dry field of crops is, I guess unsurprisingly, pretty good material for spreading something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Once it starts, and there's a lot of dry and dust and all of those types of things around it. What else is going on? In other news, we've done some more school tours with my 17-year-old. He has also been working this summer as the AV light sound crew for a local theater production. So we're getting closer to show dates for that. So he's been doing rehearsals 3 nights a week pretty much since he got out of school. And so we're excited to see what that actually looks like coming up soon. We'll have to buy some tickets. And it's a fully youth run. The director is an adult, obviously, and the music accompaniment are grown-ups, but otherwise everybody is a youth. So it's pretty fun to see what all these teens and tweens can do with their efforts focused. So I'm excited to go and see that soon. And number 3 in the family, who's 14, is going to be helping backstage. So he starts to go to rehearsals this week. And the fun part about this year is that number 2 is old enough to drive himself and has his license. So I don't have to sit in a parking lot waiting for them to be done every night, which is fantastic. Because if you're playing sports ball, you kind of know, approximately when the game's going to be over, like it's timed. But with a dramatic production, you never know when rehearsal's going to be done. Could be on time, could be 30 to 50 minutes to an hour after.
Well, and with stage crew too, it's not like they can do their part and go home.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Like some actors might be able to or whatnot. It's a pretty all in sort of a situation.
Yeah, that's right. And he's the only guy in the sound booth, so he pretty much has to be there every night. So, and what else? More cow shows. This is going to be a big week coming up. We have our 4-H Club Achievement Day, so the one show that they have to attend to finish their dairy club. It's our local fair this weekend. And my kid, who was in the Spice of Life Club, which was about herbs and spices, we're handing out recipes and spice packets to go along with those recipes at the fair. We have then a night show coming up next week, and then another dairy show the next weekend. So there'll be 3 shows in 8 days, which is not my idea of a good time, but some people seem to enjoy that. Hopefully some of the heat warning will taper off for all of that, because dairy show, well, any kind of showing of animals in extreme heat is not fun for the people or the animals. Yeah, so that's some of the highlights of the last little while. So, like we said, we've got this one last episode with an exciting guest for you guys. And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your summer, that you share this episode or another episode with a friend. And we look forward to welcoming you back in season 5, which sounds really wild to say. 5 years. Craziness. All right, let's welcome the guest for this week.
All right, sounds good.
Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meet success?
The team at ChopLocal is standing by ready to help. Sell your meat on the ChopLocal Marketplace. Check out all their free meat marketing educational resources at ChopLocal University. Hire the team to help you out or tune into their new podcast called Meat Success.
And remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success. Let us help you fine-tune yours today at ChopLocalUniversity.com.
Today, we are excited to be talking to Tara Vander Dussen, who is joining us from New Mexico. So we get to cross another state off of our list, which is exciting for us. And Tara, we start each of our interviews with the same question, and this is your intro to our listeners. So we always ask, what are you growing? So usually for our farmers, that's crops and livestock, but also includes kids and businesses and all kinds of other stuff. So what are you growing?
Yeah, so I'll start with the actual farming side of things. I actually moved recently, and for the first time in my life, I actually live on a field. So I live on a corner of a center pivot. All the rest of my life, pretty much, I've lived on a dairy or like rangeland. So I'm growing hay grazer in my backyard, and it has been really, really fun. I don't know, just to have it be like literally right there. And I really enjoyed it. I may feel differently when the August flies come rolling in, but right now it's fantastic and it's so green and beautiful. We were talking about this before we jumped on, but it's raining like crazy in New Mexico, which is really unusual. So it's really been super fun to be growing something in our backyard. And then as far as kids and businesses, I am raising two girls and we homeschool, and we are in the thick of summer homeschool, which is challenging because kids want to be outside and not being forced to do schoolwork. But it has been really valuable for us as a homeschool family to do a few days a week of summer school. So we are doing that. And then as far as businesses, me and my co-host Natalie Kovarik, which I don't know if she's been on the podcast, coming on the podcast. I think we both talked with you guys, but we are growing our podcast Discover Ag, a weekly podcast that covers agriculture, Western culture with a pop culture twist. So those are kind of a little bit about me right now.
That is a lot of different growing things. So we talked briefly before we hit the record button, which we should never do because then you miss stuff. So you said it's also not as hot in New Mexico this summer as it has been. So maybe the homeschool isn't quite as hard when it's 110 outside, but like if it's
Yeah, last summer it was such a hot June. I mean, it was just 100, 100, 105. We had a few days over 110. I think we saw 113 a couple days, which is pretty hot for us. I mean, we definitely hit over 100, but over 110 is just there's different levels of heat, I think, and it's like you hit 100 and then you hit 110 and it just gets hotter and hotter. This year, May through June, we have just caught a ton of rains, and it has been a much cooler summer so far. I mean, we've had days that have only been like 75. I think our hottest we've seen is 95, and it's been a couple days. So really unusual. It's funny when you're used to hot weather, 75, you're like, oh my gosh, like I've worn a sweatshirt so many days. It's been funny. I actually it's going to be 4th of July this weekend, and I bought one of the USA sweaters. And I was thinking to myself when I bought it, I'm never even going to be able to wear this. Where am I going to wear a sweater on the 4th of July?
yeah, I'll have to go somewhere else in the US in order to wear this sweater.
I'm like, I'm going on day 3 of that sweater being in my rotation.
So you said you also have a connection to dairy. Are there also cows still being grown in your vicinity or in your life?
Yes, we are a dairy farm here in New Mexico. So I actually grew up on a dairy farm in New Mexico. I married the dairy farmer just down the road, classic dairy farm love story, I guess. And so my husband and I are still in the dairy business with his family. And so, yeah, the house that, is on the corner of a center pivot, it is, across a pivot from a dairy. So, yeah, we are growing cows as well.
So, Tara, I'm gonna interrupt because you just mentioned the corner of a center pivot for the second time. And as a Midwesterner who is like, I'm a little shocked how itchy my brain is at the existence of the corner of center pivots. Like, I have to admit, when I fly over and I'm like, it's fucking corners. What are you supposed to do with those? What do people do with those? Like, I grew up in a place where it's very like 90 degrees, just square.
Use every inch of the field.
Yeah, I mean, we farm fence row to fence row, and then you start ripping out fence rows so you can farm a bigger square. Like, there's no corners. So, I mean, besides putting houses on them, what do you do with the corner of a center pivot spot?
Yeah, that's such a good question. A question I hear a lot. Yeah, you guys don't call it dry land because you guys get rain, but people that don't use irrigation, I guess, would be the words. Always ask about the center pivot. So yeah, if you don't know, it's a big center pivot. It's a big circle. We end up with a lot of corners. You can do a few things. If it rains enough, you can still plant those and it just be dry land. Obviously, getting moisture still from the irrigation, like in the vicinity. My house is on one, so that's a common thing. A lot of times it'll be the barn, the storage area, the shop will go on the center pivots. And then a lot of times it's just natural grass. I mean, in New Mexico, our limiting resource is absolutely water. So a lot of times there is only enough water to water that center pivot. And a lot of times you'll see fields, I always call them like Pac-Man fields, where they've cut out, corners even where they've stopped irrigating, or you'll see just the circle getting smaller and smaller, or, just lots of different things like that to make less acres. So typically those corners, yeah, there's not always enough water even to water them. A lot of times they're also really great, just like natural habitat. Like if you just have natural grasses growing on them, as far as, our insect friends, lots of deer, those kind of things will a lot of times, inhabit in those areas. So I think it just kind of depends on the farm and what you have going on. But a lot of times, yeah, it's not really like usable. I mean, I don't want to say it's like wasted acres, but I mean, there's just not a lot you're doing on them. So you'll see a lot that are just, natural grass.
Sure.
Thank you for clarifying too what those goobery little wedges are out of the middle. Like it just, and especially like the last time I flew over that part of the country, I think I had my kids with me, and I don't think you mentioned how old your girls are, but my kids are now 7 and 8, so they would have been like 5 and 6 the last time we flew with them, I think. And it was basically from Iowa to LA. What's that? What's that? What's that? And I'm just making shit up just to stop them asking any louder questions about things.
Yeah, when you're in the air, you don't have Google to help you along with answering questions. Yeah, my kids are actually 11 and 8, so similar ages. I think it's a really fun age, but definitely I feel like from that 5 till I don't know when it stops, but a lot of what's that? What's that? What's that?
So I know that asking numbers is always tricky, but can you give our listeners a sense of scale when it comes to how much land you require to look after the potential number of cows that you're actually milking?
Yeah, so we do farm some our own, but we actually work with a lot of farmers in our area where we buy feed from them. And so, I mean, my husband, we obviously do farm acres, but my husband is very much a dairyman, like just to his core. Farming is definitely secondary. He always jokes, I wouldn't farm if I didn't have to feed cows, and he would much rather be with the cows. So we do have a farm crew and acres, but yeah, a lot of our stuff we bring in or we hire custom harvesters that help us with our harvesting. And then the dairy that I live on right now milks about 1,800. So if you know anything about New Mexico is this, like, I feel like unicorn state, even compared to the rest of the United States. Eastern New Mexico and West Texas, actually, if you lumped in, like if you cut the state of Texas in half and then cut the state of New Mexico in half and just looked at that region, it is just a very different area. So we have the largest average herd size in New Mexico. If you, again, just include West Texas and New Mexico, it's even larger. So lots and lots of sprawling acres. Most of our barns are open lot, a lot of them. If you go north of the I-40, typically you end up with more free stalls. South of the I-40, you end up with open lots. So just kind of the perfect climate area for having these like larger scale dairies. So I always give that asterisk, I guess, because obviously 1,800 is a very large number for most places in the country. But this region, I think average herd size now is at over 4,000. So just some numbers out there in perspective.
Right. And coming from a northern climate, if you don't have to house each and every one of those animals, then that makes a really big difference, right?
Absolutely.
It seems like too, I mean, we raise beef cattle, but I've milked and we live in a fairly heavily dairy area in northeast Iowa. It seems like damp in particular is not good for dairy cattle. I mean, damp doesn't seem to be good for cows at all, but it seems like they handle cold better than they do dampness. So it seems like hot and dry would be, I mean, maybe they'd prefer less hot, but hot and dry over hot and damp or cold and damp seems preferable.
Yeah, that was actually something we talked about before jumping on the line, that I said the cows are handling the rain actually pretty well considering they're not super used to it. And we've had hot enough days and enough sun to be able to dry out the pens fairly quickly, keeping, the pens scraped and like just really being on that with the cows. But definitely cows, yes, in the summer they're not thrilled, with the heat, but the rest of our year I would say is a pretty mild climate. We don't get super super cold. Our hot spells are pretty quick. If you go any further south, like if you go just southern New Mexico, obviously Arizona, you're going to see a lot more of like the misters. You're going to see a lot more of like the barns with even larger shades. I mean, we have shades, but you're going to just see a lot more of those like misting systems and things. And again, like we're just kind of in that in between. Like we're right there where it's like we don't have to have the freestall and we don't have to full on have misters. And so I think that is why this area has thrived with like the dairy that it has.
Yeah, and I think here, I mean, fans and misters are pretty common just because our humidity tends to be about 9,000% this time of year. So even it doesn't have to get that hot to be pretty miserable. And I think it's one of the biggest surprises to non livestock people, especially about cattle, is that they don't mind cold that much, but damp will kill, you know, calves and cows occasionally faster than cold will.
Yeah, that humidity. Never heard of her. Don't know what she is. Like you need to explain. I need to explain the corners. I don't understand that.
I'll send you. I'll just bottle it up and send it to you.
Yeah. Turn off the fan after when you have a shower in your bathroom and leave the door closed for a while. Yeah, you'll experience it eventually.
Oh, when I go to humid places, I just melt. Like, I literally just fall apart, and I'm like, "I don't know what to do here."
So, what breed of cows do you have too? Did you tell us? These are the important questions. Like,
Very important. We are primarily Holstein. There will be the odd Jersey in there every once in a while, but overwhelmingly we are a Holstein operation. And then recently well, it's been several years now, but still very recent, I guess, in my lifetime, I've started very heavy on the beef on dairy. And while we sell a lot at day old, we're very much in like beef country, Amarillo, Hereford, all of those. We have all the major packers around us, lots of cattle ranches. And so we sell a lot of our day old beef on dairy, but we have started raising some ourselves just to kind of, I don't know, I feel like we're playing with the market a little, like experimenting a little with that. And so you will see some pens filled with black calves as well, but primarily the black and whites.
I love how dairy people, I don't feel like we see this with beef, but everyone mentions that some jerseys have just like snuck in. Like it's some sort of like undercover spy plot thing that like
It's something about the lashes and yeah, they're cute. Yeah.
I mean I understand it, don't get me wrong, but it's the way y'all talk about it, like you bought a truckload of cows and you unloaded them and there was one jersey just like hiding amongst all these Holsteins when you took them off the truck. Like
On that note, Katie, one of our jerseys we have just in the last few years, a few have infiltrated, and the vet confirmed yesterday that one of our jerseys is pregnant with twins. So my husband's just rolling his eyes because it's sex semen. So it's likely to be two more female jerseys.
So we actually farm. My husband is from a family of 6 boys, and 5 out of the 6 went into dairy. And so we are all like dairying. We like have separate dairies, but kind of all dairy together. It's like you know how family operations go. And so one of the dairies was purchased by the brothers. The guy, the former dairyman, he raised some jerseys and some like brown Swiss, a couple like odds and ends for show cattle. And so that is how they have kind of like snuck their way into the rest of the herd slowly but surely. As you say, they're multiplying and getting more. My girls also obviously have an affinity for the brown cows, and so I think that has helped keep the jerseys and the brown Swiss around for longer, is because they are very, very quickly a favorite for the girls.
I think those stealthy show cattle are how they ended up at Arlene's house too, right?
Yeah, and a daughter. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the classic story.
Yeah, that's right. A daughter who showed a jersey, and then dad was convinced to let it stay. So,
I like it's like chicken math for cow people. It's like Jersey math. Like one sneaks in and then they're having twins and
yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Thankfully, they don't have, whole litters or bunches of eggs like chickens do.
can you imagine?
So, you already mentioned that you grew up on a dairy farm, but can you tell us a little bit more about your background when it comes to like your education and the environmental side of agriculture that you're involved in?
Yeah, so I do have kind of, I guess, a unique role. I think it's probably becoming more common, but when I first graduated from college, it was definitely a unique role. So when I left the dairy farm, I was like, I don't see myself coming back. I had 2 brothers. Like, I just didn't really see necessarily where I would like fit back in. And I didn't really at the time, I feel like, have like a strong love for it. And so I went and got my degree in environmental science, thought I was like, going to law school, took my LSAT, was like all set to not come back to a farm, especially a dairy. Then started dating my husband my junior year in college. Obviously got married, came back to his family dairy farm. And so what I ended up doing with my degree, it's like crazy, how things work out and how much you end up loving things you didn't realize. I mean, I think it took going away to college to come back and realize how much I love the dairy. And so I found my place actually working for an environmental consulting company. We were based in Santa Fe, and we had agricultural projects throughout the Southwest. And obviously, my primary focus was dairy within those agricultural sites. And so I did all of the environmental work for dairy. So I have actually never, like, my job on the dairy has never been necessarily, like, I always joke, like, I never worked with the cows. Mine has always been the back end. So my husband and I's dairy, my parents' dairy, and then obviously clients throughout New Mexico, they were my clients that I did work for. And so I did permitting, water rights, manure management, soil health, just all of the good stuff. Lagoon management. I've seen more lagoons than I could shake a stick at, I'll tell you. I've spent a lot of time at lagoons on dairies, but that was what I did for over 10 years. And just in the last few years, I transitioned. Well, I started sharing on social media, and then Natalie and I launched our podcast, which became a huge focus for me, and continued kind of balancing a little bit of everything. But when I decided to bring on homeschooling, I did finally let the environmental work go for the most part. I try to keep my foot in the door with different things, and I'm on boards. I'm on several like environmental boards in the United States for dairy and those kind of things. But, sometimes at some point with family, like something's got to give. And so that has been, been a really great transition for me personally. The environmental space can be a hard space to continue to work in. Dairy farmers are amazing people. Talking to them every day about their back end of their dairy is not always the most fun thing to do. I mean, it's like the least favorite thing of a dairy farmer to talk about. And so, I loved what I did. I loved helping dairy farmers and being like that liaison between the dairy farmer and their regulators. But I do really love what I do now with Natalie and the podcast and being home with my kids a little bit more.
Podcasts are free to listen to, but they aren't free to create. Katie and I would appreciate your support as we work to build the Barnyard language community.
Patreon is an easy way for you to make a contribution that goes directly to making the show. As a member of our Patreon community, you get to watch the video version of our weekly updates, complete with questionable hairstyles and clutter. With 3 levels of support, you can choose a tier that works for you.
Keep the podcast going by becoming a patron today at patreon.com/barnyardlanguage.
So, Tara, and it sounds like with regulating lagoons, like you are on the back end of the dairy production in more than one sense, as it were. How can we help farmers and regulators and customers see each other as members of a team rather than, I feel like it gets so adversarial so quickly? And as a farmer, I understand why. Like, don't get me wrong. But it's not helpful to just, bitch about things like environmental laws that really are there through an attempt to keep people safe.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So, whenever I was actually in college, my dad was on a board and they were rewriting like the dairy rules for New Mexico. So, New Mexico has pretty strict environmental laws. Actually, a lot of times we don't necessarily work with like EPA because our, like, depending on where you're at and where groundwater you have, you can be completely regulated through the state. And so, my dad was on the board working on rewriting these, and I sat in on a few meetings, just like, kind of like dipping my toes in this space. And I left telling my dad, you guys are saying the same thing. You're just not speaking the same language. Like, you guys want the same thing. And I think one of the things that regulators have to remember is like a lot of times environmental costs are not costs you necessarily see a return on. Yes, like you want healthy soil, you want healthy water. Like, dairy farmers understand that. All farmers understand that. But as far as like monetary value is not always there. And so it is a cost balancing thing. Like, okay, if an environmental regulator comes in and wants 3 things done, a lot of times it's like, okay, which one's our priority? Which one can we do? Because doing all 3 in 1 year is like probably not going to happen. And so I think that's one thing. And then on the dairy farmer side, I always try to remember them. There is occasionally bad actors. There are. Like, there's bad actors in every single industry. And unfortunately, not everyone is going to do the best they can do every single time. And so there are regulations and rules and laws in place. Like, that is part of it. And it's, you guys don't have to fight each other on it. Like, and so I always, like, this is my science brain. Like, I'm always just like, what does the science say? What is the sound science here? And going to the dairy farmers, the same. Like, okay, your regulator's asking for this. What does the science say? What are your soils like? What is your water like? Do we have a problem? Because your chances are your family's drinking that water. Your family is living in those fields, right? Like, I have always drank the same water as my cows. It literally went into a tank on the dairy and it split one way to go to the cows and it split another way to go to my house. I want that water to be healthy. And I know most of my dairy farmers do. And so I think having very like practical conversations on both sides helps. And then having those cost analysis conversations too. A lot of times when I was working with clients, I would do an end year summary and I would look at the next year and I'd put 3 things on that list and say, okay, These are the 3 things that I think would really make your regulator happy. What is the one we can tackle? And then if it's something we, need financial assistance with, can we look at getting equip from NRCS? Can we look at what other options are out there to support you? In this green revolution, I kind of like use that with air quotes, but like there's a lot of opportunity for different grants and things for farmers. And so trying to just be as practical and like straightforward with science at the basis, I think helps. But I think that both sides have to understand like they do want the same thing. They're just coming at it from 2 different directions.
Well, and I think too, as I'm living in a state where, they're talking about like the state capital, the water is so full of nitrates right now that it's like a huge, I'm trying not to say shit show, but shit show is probably the right way to put it. And people who are not farmers can get so farmers are evil, which I understand. Like, it's got to be incredibly frustrating to be like, here's this huge source of what we understand to be like the end all be all of all this pollution. It's keeping us from going swimming and, making our water nasty. But there's no way for farmers not to be defensive. It's human nature to be defensive when people are like, you are ruining everything. But also giving people grace and some understanding of things like, when you talk about the cost benefit, like my banker does not accept slightly better environmental quality or the good feelings of having pollinators or whatever as like a way to pay my operating loan. Like that is not a currency that they accept. So there is that, just the realities of these things as well. And I say this having a friend who is a lawyer for the DNR and was an EPA lawyer, and you know, we yeah.
Yeah, and I think that one, like, 2 things actually on that. One of the things is I don't know how many times I've seen too where regulators have required something and 5 years later they changed what it was, right? Like, this is the science. Like, this is what you have to do. This is going to save water. And I have seen dairymen spend hundreds of thousands of dollars installing new lagoon management practices, entirely new lagoons, for 5 years later them to say, well, actually we learned that's not so great. And like that's really difficult to do. And then I think another piece, especially with EPA, I think it's less of an issue at a state level, although it is. I mean, a lot of us live in states where our state capital is nothing like the rest of the state. And I would say New Mexico with Santa Fe and Albuquerque, the rest of the state like gets forgotten about. But even higher up, when you have EPA coming out, like our EPA is from Dallas, that's their headquarters, you know, I think there's a lot of preconceived notions in our area. I'm sure the EPA from Dallas is thinking, oh, these huge dairies out there, they're causing all the problems. And people show up then, as to your point, dairy farmers are already thinking that's what they're thinking about them. So they're very defensive. Chances are sometimes the regulators are very defensive. If they've worked with a bad apple, then they're just going to assume every single one is there. And so I've also always told my dairy farmer, put a face with a name. If that regulator's out there, you be out there with them all day long. You talk with them, whatever, like they need to know who you are so that you can communicate. You can't communicate via email and expect everyone to always like be on the same page, I mean, it's like sending text to people that and you're like, are they mad at me? Like, right? Like, it's like, go out and meet with them, make sure they know who you are, make sure they know, you're living here, you care about this, and you're working with them. And I think that, like, while it's all easier said than done, I do think that's where some of that disconnect is if you have preconceived notions about people and then you show up, you're going to be defensive. With both sides are going to be defensive.
I think too, from a producer standpoint, just thinking about the people we have on our team, reducing the antagonism that like I would never call the vet out or call my seed rep or my semen salesman or whoever and be like, you're the worst and I'm not coming out of my house and I hate you and I'm going to say really mean things about you everywhere on social media, and why won't you help me, and why are you so mean to me? Like, you can't you can't meet your regulators with that energy and then be mad when they're like, farmers are the worst, because that's not the way you would treat anybody else, hopefully not the way you're treating other people that you deal with.
No, I think that's such a good point. We consider so many other people a part of our team. even though they may be like kind of regulating us in some way or another also. I mean, they're checking in on different things. Like I even think our milk inspectors a lot of times, are considered more a part of the team, but the environmental regulators, it is just that instant barrier of like, oh, they're out to get me. And it's like, probably not. And like the more that regulators, and it's not always true, but a lot of times they were people who were some kind of ag background or ag adjacent, ended up getting, I mean, I could have like, thinking about my degree, I very well could have went and worked for, the state environment department or an EPA or something. And like, I would have obviously had ag background. That's again, not always the case, but like, I just think like having some of those conversations can go a really long way. I know that the company I worked for, we hired a girl who had no ag background, was like hardcore. Like she thought she was going to come in and like hate working with the dairy farmers, and like was very skeptical and was very much like, well, I'm sure they are polluting the water, And by the time that she left the company, she was the managing like just as many dairies as me, and like loved the dairy farmers and they loved her. And it was like such a testament to like how it started to how it ended, of just like getting to know each other.
Turns out human connection does actually matter, right? Go figure. So if someone has never listened to Discover Ag before, they've been living under a rock and haven't even heard of it, can you tell our listeners what they're missing out on?
Yeah, so Discover Ag, we have a lot of fun over there. We do cover serious topics, but we also we always say it's like a blend of entertainment and education. And so the way what we do is every week we cover the top 4 articles. We have a really great community of discos, is what they call themselves. They named themselves, and we totally rolled with it. If you see my wallpaper, if you're watching this, my wallpaper on the back of my wall has disco balls on it. Everything is disco themed for Discover Ag. But we cover the top 4 articles that get sent in a lot of times by our community. They're like, hey, this is trending. We want you guys to cover it. Discos also write in if they have like firsthand knowledge of different things that are going on in different areas. They'll give us information. And so each week we kind of break down those topics, and we usually pick 2 a little more lighthearted and then 2 a little more serious. And there's, a lot of like hints of pop culture, Western culture, and then obviously agriculture. And so, last week we covered our fun one was actually Jason Kelsey and Travis Kelsey were talking about Wagyu beef on their podcast. And so we, had some fun talking about that. In the same exact breath, we also covered the big, beautiful bill and what it means for, some of the national parks and some of the sales of like public lands that were going on. And so it's just a very diverse range of things we're talking about on the podcast. But just trying to bring, I guess, make agriculture news a little bit more relevant, a little bit more like current trending, and have a little bit more fun with it.
So when it comes to ag news, it feels like, well, any news, it's hard to find sources that you actually trust or that you feel like there's even been any research and not just, like an AI article, generated about whatever topic it is. So how do you find trusted news sources when you're talking about, like the more serious topics? Where do you go to when you're actually looking for the facts and the reality of the situation? Because I think it's especially hard when there are so few of us involved in ag and so few people writing about ag, to find those sources when we actually want the answers.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually how Discover Ag was kind of born, was like we were continuing, we had a podcast and we were covering something completely different. And we kept seeing these news articles, like, the Washington Post, the New York Times would cover these agriculture stories, and they wouldn't interview a single farmer in them. And we'd be like, this could have been like, maybe it wasn't terrible, but like it could have been so much better and so much more factual if you had taken the time to interview 3 farmers or 3 people involved in ag. And so we ended up like taking those articles and covering them on our podcast, giving like our perspective. And we'd ask like family members, friends, reach out to contacts on, social or different, channels through LinkedIn, and find people to like speak to us about it. And then we'd share it on the podcast. And so we still a lot of times cover those like headliners that are like way misleading, and then try to break it down. And I will say, I think one of the things that Natalie and I try to do is not rely on one source. Like, can we go to 4 different places and find something that's similar? Can we go back to the original press release and see what was actually said? What we have found is a lot of times those big news articles, they will literally just like take the press release, take 2 quotes, and every single one of their articles is almost exactly the same without giving any facts. And then a lot of times we bring in experts. So recently we covered, there was a reel going viral about how McDonald's fries were poisonous and they were being sprayed with, toxic chemicals. I'm sure everyone can picture some kind of reel like that. And so we actually brought on a potato farmer that we know, and he was like, that chemical they mentioned hasn't been used since, I think he said 2011, and like he literally just gave the facts. And he spoke from his experience, and he said, I know other farmers, potato farmers that do this, this, and this. Here's what I do. And at least like give some kind of like boots on the ground information about what's going on. And so we found that that's been really helpful, as obviously we look for the news sources, but then just bringing it on like straight from the horse's mouth of what's going on. And then some new things we've been doing is some interviews that are longer form content. So this past week, we started a 3-part series about glyphosate and GMOs. And so we brought on someone. The first one was someone that is very anti glyphosate and GMOs. And again, that person was recommended to us by discos who feel strongly on that side of the court. And then the next one we're bringing on is a professor that is obviously very pro GMOs and glyphosate. And then both Natalie and I have been, we read books that we've found that have been recommended, different things. And then we're going to kind of give like, I guess, our summary of opinion at the end of the 3-part series of what we felt like after interviewing all these people, reading all these books. And giving sources to people. Like, if you want more, here's the books we like read and recommend. So I guess I feel like I've just gave you a really long answer, but kind of taking a little bit from all over the place, like that. I think you get a better understanding, and we try to grab both viewpoints as well, like just like the GMO thing, so that it's not just a one-sided conversation. And if we both agree on something, a lot of times one of us will play the devil's advocate of like, here's what I found on the opposite side, so that we can like speak on the, say this as well. And then again, that community, I mean, it never fails. If we say something, our community members like roll in with, things they've found, things they know firsthand, and then recommending people for us to interview.
Tara, I really want to applaud you guys for actually seeking out multiple viewpoints, because I know it's not nearly as I hate when people say sexy about this, but it's not nearly as doesn't have nearly the drawing power of being like, look at this evil person who is being evil. And there's idiots in every group. Like, there's always some knucklehead. And I get that, the New York Times is not going to sell a lot of papers by being like, 7.9 billion people did their best today. And there were a few idiots, but it's lazy journalism to just be like, look at this one sensationalist bad thing that happened, and ignore all the deeper, more nuanced stories that we could have told, because it's way faster and it sells way more headlines if we're just like, look at this one really horrific thing. It's never anything good either. It's never anything like, look at this farmer who did something great. It's just, they're trying to kill us all.
I agree with you. And I think with the reels going viral, like a lot of times we cover reels, like that's actually been something more and more that we just get sent because they go viral. And I mean, obviously, it's not that big of a surprise that some of our news sources are transitioning to reels, unfortunately, that, are, 60 seconds long instead of actual journalism, even, which is problematic in its own right, but reels are even worse. And it's so frustrating because like there was this crazy reel about Wagyu beef and like how horrible it was and what they were feeding them, and like just absolutely BS. Like we both were like, where did they even get this from? Like, did they just make it up? And of course, it had millions and millions of views. And Natalie and I break down it and like give factual information. You're like, oh, good, 10,000 people listened, like, and it can be so frustrating. With raw milk, it's something a ton of times right now. I mean, tons of people are going viral about whether pro raw milk or anti raw milk. I have always said I'm very much in the middle. I've spent about half my life drinking raw milk, half my life not. I feel like it is a nuanced conversation. Does that go viral? Oh no, no. Me just being like, this is practically, here's what's going on. Here are the facts. Here are how it's regulated, how it's tested. No, that's not what people want. And like to your point, it sucks because what sells the newspapers, what sells, the reels, whatever, is that going viral moment. And it's just so hard to combat that. It's, there's like a law, I think it's called Brandolini's law. And it's basically like once the bell has been rung, it's hard to unring it, right? Like once the misinformation's out there, it takes X times more factual information to retract that misinformation. Like it sticks in your brain so much. And so it's just extremely frustrating. And it's definitely, I mean, people are picking up that it's how it makes them go viral. So unfortunately, we're going to see more and more of that style content. And AI, I think, is not going to help, because I just keep waiting for the AI videos to like give quote unquote proof to what these people are saying, right? That if they can say something and then create an AI video, like how crazy is that going to be? Like I saw a video that had been created about what people were feeding cows. And first of all, they were talking about beef cows and they showed dairy cows, which is my biggest pet peeve. But the video had been AI generated of what they were feeding cows. And so it was like, I was like, you obviously couldn't even find that on the internet. You made that fake video to back up what you were saying. But like people that have never even been on the farm before, how are they supposed to know that's AI?
Well, and I feel like it's just an extension of, and I appreciate the depth of feeling that a lot of animal welfare, I don't, trying to leave the animal rights people out of this, the depth of conviction that a lot of people bring to this. But you could take enough video of anyone who deals with livestock and eventually edit it into something that would make any of us look horrific. And, with no, especially for folks with no ag background, but, if you're not showing that I'm hot shotting that cow because otherwise she won't get up and she will die if she does not get up, because that is how cows are made, you could take enough footage of any of us to eventually edit it into something that would look horrible to anyone who didn't know what was going on. And AI is just making that easier and faster. And as someone who works in the tech space, it makes me really angry because AI can do amazing, amazing things. And instead, we're using it for this bullshit. Like, at least don't be lazy and at least, like, get your undercover job on a farm and go film them for 2 years so that you can get 30 seconds of content that makes them look bad. Like, AI is just using AI for smearing people is just lazy. That's my hot take for the day.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I think we're at the beginning of it. Like, I think it's gonna get so much worse. To your point, like, I'm waiting for the first like AI, animal abuse video that like people go, that horrifies people, and it's AI. And to your point, even some of the animal activist video, I watched a presentation one time where someone actually broke down one of the videos from, an activist group, and it was crazy to see it like broken down from like a tech side. Like there were times they took the video and they mirrored image it, sped it up or slowed it down. So you didn't even realize you were watching the same footage multiple times. Like literally a 10-second clip was turned into a 40-second clip by the time it was done. And it was pretty much the same thing, just tweaked differently, zoomed in differently so that you thought like that abuse was happening. Not that any abuse is okay, but like it was just like, to your point, you spent 2 years and got maybe 30 seconds of video, and then you manipulated it into the point that like you had enough to do an entire campaign to raise money for your cause. I don't even know if that's the right word, but it's like, yeah, then if we just sprinkle in a tiny bit of AI in there, it's going to be it really, really horrible what could happen and what could come out. Because I mean, there's is farmers on the other side of that. I mean, I think at this point, like, I don't know if everyone knows someone, but you've heard of different stories, especially in the dairy industry, that things that have come out and people that have, gone out of business for something that was claimed about them.
And what's horrible is that then I think as producers, it pushes us to close ranks and to assume that any bad news about somebody is fake, because we also don't want to be the one who are, piling on somebody who hasn't done anything. And I feel like most of us also know somebody who never should have been in charge of any living thing of any sort. And that's horrific. I mean, even from the most simple standpoint of aren't you trying to make money doing this? And is starving those animals to death really the best way to make money doing this? Because that seems counterintuitive. But just, I don't want those people representing me, but then when you make it hard to tell who's actually doing something bad and who's just looks bad. And a lot of farmers, we're not all the most socially adept people. So we may not be great at communicating and explaining our side of things, and especially under pressure. And if we're getting 3 views instead of going viral and getting millions of views.
The one thing I want to say I appreciate, though, especially about your podcast, Tara, is that I can look at that viral video and think, I know that that's bullshit. Like, I know it's not true, but I don't necessarily have a potato farmer on call to be, like I do have, a couple potato farmer Facebook friends. And I'm like, am I going to be the 100th person to ask them about that video? But at least if I've listened to the podcast, then I can be like the person who sends it to me or the person who brings it up, when we're out somewhere. I can be like, I know that that's garbage, and here are the reasons why. And I didn't have to research, like, when did that pesticide, get discontinued, like, when was it made illegal, what elements of that video are made up and what has an element of truth into it, because that's usually the problem, is there are little snippets of truth in there that you can't refute. And so, but then it's like, okay, but the whole thing isn't the truth, but breaking it down is the thing that you're doing for us. So, I mean, I know we're saying that you might not go viral, but I think that when we're talking about human connection, that's what makes the difference, right? Is the one-on-one conversations, hopefully, are the ones that, over time are going to make a difference, because it goes viral for a few days, maybe a few weeks. But are people really going to stop eating potatoes? Probably not. They're still going to, they're going to go to the grocery store and be like, oh, I've got potatoes on my list. I'll buy the ones that are on sale. And so I think that, breaking down those things and doing the homework for us is really appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I happy to do it. And I will say it's funny you mentioned that about the truth, because it's something Natalie, it's become her new saying, is there are seeds of truth. And we broke down a grass-fed reel just last week. And it was like, well, that is kind of true. Like, okay. But then like the way they paired it with something that was scary and buzzwords and all these things, I was like,
Ominous music.
yes, and I was like, I can't believe, I think I said in the podcast, I said, I can't believe that they can turn something that's actually good into something so bad by just using the right words and the terrible music, And so that's what's hard, is because then, if you get asked, you're like, well, yeah, there is a piece of truth to that, but it's not something to be scared of. Like, it's not a terrible thing.
Yeah, here's the reason why that's actually a good thing, or why it's that way, why the science suggests that, like, that's actually the best way to, raise an animal, raise a plant, whatever.
Yeah, and then with the potato farmer, it's funny when we asked him, I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to, debunk this reel with us." And he was like, "If you knew how many times I get sent that reel like in a year." And like he's not a social media personality, just a farmer. I say just a farmer, but he's not necessarily sharing on social where people would be sending a ton of things. And he was like, "I get sent it so much." And my hope is always now, like, hopefully when someone sees that reel or gets sent that reel, like, you would be able to grab that interview off of YouTube, dump the link in, and be like, here's an actual potato farmer talking about it, right? Like, that's simple. And so being able to hopefully do things like that, that's our goal for Discover Ag, for sure.
And he at least can now copy that link and reply.
He can take it and say, look at what a great job I did for 10 minutes explaining this, and I had our editors on the back end, spruce it up, make it exciting, show pictures. And hopefully, yeah, he doesn't have to sit there and type out, 10 minutes worth of explanation.
So, Tara, as we're raising the next generation, and also, I don't want to say like re-educating people, but helping people understand sort of the easy marks of how to tell if something has been edited or created in a way to be persuasive. It was actually making me think, when you were talking about the grainy, shaky footage and the ominous music, that like more than a decade ago we had a professional photographer came out to our place to do some photos for a local farmers cooperative. And one of the photos got shared with the rest of the group of one of our lambs, but it was in black and white. And as an artsy photo, it was nice. One of the other producers, not realizing that it was one of my sheep, said that it looked like sheep Auschwitz. I understand how he got there, but what sort of things can we look out for that we can educate people? Sort of like the top 5. If you see this, this, and this, somebody has more of an agenda than might be obvious, sort of things.
Yeah, that's funny. My husband always says if he could take a picture, like right now, our dogs, it's been raining, they're muddy, they're like thrilled to be living their best lives in the rain and the mud. And he's like, if I took a video of them right now, laying on concrete, and then put it to ominous music, like people would be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Sarah McLachlan's singing in the background.
Yeah, Sarah McLachlan song, like, people would be donating money to me to save these dogs, and, like, our dogs, like, could not love life more. And so it is hard. I think that's one of the hard things, like, the disconnect too with people with agriculture is, like, you know, my husband and I were talking to the other day, to your point about the hot shot, we were talking about hip clamps. And it's like, how on earth do you explain that to someone that's never been on a farm? They've never seen a cow. They've never dealt with a sick cow. They don't know what it takes to get them up, like all of those things. And so, I think there's a few things. I do think one transition I have seen on the internet in the comment section is people are getting a little bit smarter. They're getting more skeptical of the people going viral. There is more like you'll go in some of those reels now, and before it would be, just comment after comment of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Can't believe farmers would do this. And there is little sprinkles of hope every once in a while of people being like, this cannot be true. Like, this is not true. This is misinformation. This is, and like pushing back a little bit more. And we love to see that, right? Like, I think that that's a huge thing. It may be tiny, but like that little pushback is enough to be like, somebody is saying like, this isn't right. I also think the generation of Gen Z and Gen Alpha are maybe a little more qualified than our millennial generation of being like, we grew up with social media, we grew up with now AI, like they question things more than their counterparts. And I think maybe some of that is how we got to where we're at, of people questioning, well, what are farmers doing? What is going on? But now they're questioning on all sides, that maybe there's more than just one way. Maybe there is, more sides to the story. And I think that's really helpful. I think we have to raise a generation that is a little more critical of what's online and doesn't just believe the first thing they see. And then from farmers' side, I mean, I know this is like such a cliche answer and I hate even giving it, but people have to know where their food comes from. And like, I don't know that I have like the silver bullet of how we get there, but like, I just think that the more and more disconnect we get, the worse it is. And I do think post COVID, if there's one good thing that's come out of COVID, is people are asking questions. They do want to know where things come from. And there is a movement to like, understand where your food comes from. And I think as farmers, we have to lean into that. It's something I talk about a lot. Something I talk about actually in the keynote I give is like, how do we take this moment and like use it to not necessarily use it for evil, but use it for good, that people are asking questions. And to your point earlier, like we can't close ranks when people have a question. We can't come off defensive when people have a question. We've got to like be open to answering like the quote unquote dumb questions, right? Like people don't know what's going on. And so they're going to have dumb questions. They're going to believe things they see on the internet. And so being able to connect with them however we can. I mean, I know that's the goal of, a lot of social media accounts, a lot of checkoffs, a lot of the farm bureaus, right? Like everyone talks about sharing your story. And I don't think it's quite as simple as that. But I do think there's some momentum right now of people being interested and like gaining on that momentum. I feel like you told me to get 5 and I think I'm at 3, but I feel like it's a tough question to answer because it is how do we get there? How do we get people to understand where ag is from if they, haven't really ever left the bounds of New York City or LA? And so, it's a very, I think, layered issue that I think we're going to have to figure out sooner rather than later, because I think one of the things I worry about as a farmer is if people don't understand what we do or why we do it. I always think it removes toolboxes, like a tool from our toolbox. So if you implement a new technology on your farm and consumers don't understand it, don't like it, and we end up with, a non-GMO butterfly, but for some other technology, whatever it is, right? That gets removed from us, that we can't use that anymore. And so we have to figure out how to like break these barriers.
I think that's one of the scary things too, right? Is when those tools get taken up by potentially someone who is, maybe an activist or people that don't understand them, that they have no stake in that tool. Like say the other AI, right? Like there are people in on the internet who think that artificial insemination is cruel. But they have no reason to use that technology, right? So there's no motivation for them to really understand it, or to, like, to vote on the other side of that if it comes to something where it gets voted on by popular opinion. But yeah, it has huge consequences for the people who are using that thing. So if we don't have those connections and the trust of our consumers, then it is really hard to then try and make those explanations of, like, well, this is an important tool for us. You might not understand it, and we can try and explain it to you, but sometimes you just have to trust us that we're actually doing what's best for our industry, doing what's best for our animals, and hope that they believe us. But we have to keep that trust in order for consumers to believe us.
Yeah, AI is AIing, as you said, the agriculture AIing is such a good example of like there are so many benefits to the animal of, waiting more extended period of time. Like we have a longer, post, delivery protocol in place, right? Like there's so many things. The safety of our employees. Like I grew up on a bull bred operation, and I can't tell you how many like dents there were in my dad's truck, right? If he had to take his truck into a pen for something, like how many times I've seen, grown men run out of pens real fast as they could get out. Like it's a very, again, another nuanced conversation. That word I know has already been used today, but it is a nuanced conversation. And yet it has been turned into such a terrible thing in so many different online groups, so many different like social media realms. And it's like, wait, how do you turn something that's really good for the animal, for us, for the employees, like for, whatever on all levels?
For the environment, I mean, like, there's a huge list, right? Like, if we're talking about environmentalism, like, yeah, we could, us farmers could could go on, like, the big rant of all the ways that it improves things. But yeah, someone has seen a video.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Arlene, as a bull bred producer, I take offense at your hatred, obviously, of bulls. No, we're incredibly lucky, and we're small enough that we have one bull, and we were able to be very choosy about who we brought in. And I think, and this is an aside from the actual point I had, but when people think that AI in cows is so awful, maybe we need to just show them videos of what bull breeding is like, because I don't know if they think that the bull is like making a bubble bath for the cows and like lighting some candles and taking them out to dinner. Like, it's a very wham bam, thank you, ma'am, on a good day. It's not a real delightful encounter for. I mean, the bull doesn't even look that excited.
Delightful encounter. There you go.
That is, my dad has always said the same thing. Anyone who has negative things, like, obviously when he transitioned, he, again, not that he is against bull breeding, but he's like, if you think that bull breeding is like nice and like you think that the bull is like buying that cow flowers and the lighting's great and, she's totally excited about it, you are wrong.
Yeah, it's all consensual. Yeah.
Yeah, it's consensual. And I think another point too is like we have so much more control over how it's being done. You think about a heifer and a bull, like again to your point, you get to be a little bit choosy about the bull, but there is still some degree there of like not always like exact who is where and what pens and depending on the scale and all of those questions. And it's like, it's just not AI. It does not make it, it's not bad. It's not bad.
Well, and I think part of the difference too, just for us, is that we're running beef cattle on pasture. Like, he just goes out there and does his thing. Like, there's no interaction or, management really. Like,
And that's the thing, like, Katie, we're not talking about like bulls versus AI. We're talking about AI as a tool for any farmer in any place, right? Like, for
I actually talked to Jim about AIing our cows yesterday.
I also, well, this is always my note that bull cattle, and dairy cows. Like I always try to tell people, I'm like, is a greyhound and a dachshund the same? No, like there is just like also very different styles. Like, and dairy cows are kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're a little bit prissy if we're being honest. They require a lot. My brother recently made the transition from being a dairy farmer. And now he's a farmer and he raises beef cows. And he said, it still amazes me every day I can put my beef cows out on pasture and they don't just die on me. Like they don't just say, where is my, feed truck that delivers the food perfectly rationed for me. And so, yeah, there's like give and takes of every operation and every style and even then every breed.
Well, and I think maybe this is actually the perfect transition into where I was going with this, which is that the more transparent and calm we can be about discussing things like why we bull breed versus AI and what works best on my farm for my cows and my family at this moment, that it's that much easier to assume that if I tell you XYZ about something else, that we already have that trust built up, that you know that I am happy and able to explain something to you in a calm and reasonable manner. And if this time I'm saying, just trust me on this, there's probably a good reason for it. And, building that communication and that trust with people. Also, we have a bull for sale if anyone's interested. It's not his fault. We just have too many very nice cows out of him and too many very nice heifers out of
So
him.
this is just a marketing podcast, is what you're
Yes.
saying, Katie.
Yes, it is. Well, I thought I'd just throw it in there while we're at it. Hopefully he will be sold before this comes out. So, Tara, let's, talk about.
I'm waiting to see how Katie transitions.
I know. I'm ready for this transition.
Yeah, I got nothing here. So okay, it has the word pivotal in it. I feel like that's enough of a transition for today. We often ask our guests about that first time they became parents and what a pivotal moment it is in anyone's life. So what was that like for you? How unprepared do you think you were in retrospect, and how much better of a mother were you before you had kids? Because I feel like that's a key thing. I was so much better at this before I had children.
Yeah, that is always the way it goes, right? You know how to parent before you have kids. I always tease my mom. My mom was like just the best mom. Like she really like I cannot say I don't think hardly anything bad about my mom. It's funny because my mom homeschools for me with me. We co-homeschool 2 days a week, so my kids go to her 2 days a week so I can work. And I'm always like, if you just knew how mean Winnie was when I was a kid, but like I like try to make things up, and they are like, mom, she obviously wasn't. And so I always tease her that when I became a mom, I was like, you made it look so easy, and like that's on you. You shouldn't have made it look so easy because I was very ill prepared for how hard it was. And my mom and I have very different personalities, which I have now come to appreciate and love and realize like that is a piece of it too. But yes, I mean, I remember asking her like, how was pregnancy? She loved it. It was amazing. How was delivery? Quick, easy, how was breastfeeding? Like, it just comes really natural. None of those things are helpful when you are like a science brain that is like analyzing how things are supposed to go and like exactly how it should be. And,
Yeah, you want the statistics, but she also has your genes, so then you're also trying to consider her experience as part of your rationale.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, I think, yeah, that was probably that was a big transition for me of realizing I was going to do things like differently, and just it wasn't going to come maybe as easier in the same way as it did for her. And so that was kind of a shock. I would say to the like going back to work. I was consulting, so I had clients, and obviously delivering a baby doesn't always like happen on a time schedule. And I remember answering a phone call for a client the morning after I delivered. And they were like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm in the hospital. I just delivered my baby." And they obviously felt terrible. And we're like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't have to answer." And I was like, "I know, but like this was unexpected, and this happened like faster, than we thought." And then yeah, going back to work was really hard. I was lucky enough, I got 6 weeks. I did 2 weeks PTO and 4 weeks like short-term disability. But unfortunately my 6 weeks fell on one of our like big trade shows where we went and met with our clients. And so, oh my gosh, I felt like I had been like thrown to the wolves of like trying to, get a baby in a hotel room, get them situated with a babysitter, and then go to meetings all day, figure out pumping. It was just, it was a lot. And so, yeah, there's definitely some pivotal moments. My youngest, thankfully had already been a mom, so I had a little bit of a grasp on motherhood, but my youngest had colic really bad starting at 3 weeks. And my husband decided to have his appendix removed at 3.5 weeks postpartum. And I swear I could have killed that man. I was like, of course you have to make this moment about you. Like you can't.
Tara, I'm sorry. That is such a I can feel my brain going, yes, what the fuck, Tara's husband? Like that immediate reaction of like, why are you doing this? Like, I'm gonna assume he didn't just wake up one morning and he was like, it'd be great if I got my appendix out. Like,
Yeah, there's probably a reason.
The best part is he's like, he is never ever ever sick. And so I have this newborn baby who has been up, just, ungodly amounts of hours, and he's like, I have a stomach ache. And I was like, "Oh my gosh. You have the man flu." And I was like, do not get us sick. Don't get me sick. Please go upstairs. I'm actually leaving and going to my mom's house. I left, went to my mom's house, was like, I cannot deal with a stomach bug on top of everything else. And he obviously keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And actually, thankfully, my sister was in town. She was in college and had a rational brain that had sleep. She was like, I think he needs to go to the hospital. I think like something's wrong. So he went to the hospital, obviously got his appendix removed. But that is how terrible of a wife I am. I was like, you have the man flu. Go upstairs. Don't pester us. So yeah, it was a brutal couple of weeks, but we did survive.
So you've talked a little bit about homeschooling and making changes to your career in the last few years. Um, how has combining farming, off-farm work, childcare looked kind of at different ages and stages? Because it seems like one of those things that farm families especially have a really hard time trying to figure out, because we all know that farming is not predictable and childcare is not easy to find. So what did that look like at different times in your career and your family life?
Well, as I'm pointing to the little child opening the door, it is obviously not always easy. I will say I've been really lucky to have my mom close and a husband that's very supportive. Like, I don't know how many times, like, yes, I've had childcare. I have other sources of childcare besides my husband and my mom, but like having two people that are very on board with your career really, really helps. When I've had a sick kid where I had to leave, and childcare wasn't an option, and having my mom or my husband step in has been like, you can't replace that, right? Like, it's so important to have that support system too. And whether that is like family or friends that rally around. At one point, my sister-in-law, her and I both worked, and a lot of times we would trade if we were desperate. So at different times it's looked different to different people in my life. I will say, when I first went back to work, I went back to work part time with my oldest. And I remember being like, oh, I think like my mom says she can help me. Like, I can do this. And I think I was 2 months in. So very shortly after I actually went back to work, the baby was like, I had only been back to work a couple of weeks. I was like, oh my goodness, this is not going to work. I need more help. And so finding help has looked again different in different places. When the girls were really little, I found a woman who would come into my home and watch them. Obviously, childcare for two young kids, that it gets more expensive the more you add, the younger they are. And so having someone come in like 2 days a week, even just part time, I found an older woman who was willing to do that. That was very, very valuable for me, and just life changing. And then when COVID hit, that like threw a wrench in everything that I like had going on and what I thought. But one of the things I found is there was suddenly a lot of high school girls who were also no longer in school. So I survived for, a few months with having some high school girls come in and help me. And then just the year that I was going to have two kids in school full time, my youngest was going to be in kindergarten, is the day I decided to homeschool. So it completely like threw a wrench again in all of my plans that I had planned out. And I spoke to this. I actually do. I hire my mom as a tutor 2 days a week for my kids, and she takes care of them on Mondays and Wednesdays. I am so blessed as Natalie, as my co-host, who really respects like those Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays that are my homeschool days. I'm not saying we don't ever schedule anything on those days, but it is very much like, what can you make work? How can we make this work? And we jam pack our Mondays and Wednesdays like to the brim. We start at 8 a.m. We get kids situated, get things going in the mornings because we're both moms, and then work as late as we need to on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so I'm really thankful for that. And so, yeah, I feel like if you've taken anything, it's a little bit of a juggling act. Like, it's a little bit all over the place. There's a few times the kids are at the dairy with Daniel. We have a heifer ranch that's a couple hours away where we actually raise our cows a little closer to some feed. Some days when I'm really desperate, I'm like, today is heifer ranch day. Your dad is going to the heifer ranch and you guys get to go too, So for sure there is some of that. And so it's just, I don't know, I think you've got to find your community, whether that's like Natalie, my business partner, whether it's a sister-in-law, a mom, a friend, like you've got to have those people. And then I think I've never been afraid to ask for help or spend some money hiring someone if I've needed to, because I do think sometimes like there's been times I'm like, oh my gosh, this is probably not worth it, the money I'm spending on childcare. I've absolutely questioned that in moments in my life. But like also I've realized that phases pass really quickly, right? Like every time I've said I think I had a plan, then a major life event has changed, or in a world event with the pandemic has changed all those plans. And so sometimes like kind of just maybe surviving, and then you thrive later. There's other points where you've thrived and been like, we've got this, like we've nailed it. And so yeah, I don't know, there's a little bit of balancing and then filling in. So like I said, we're doing summer school. One of the reasons we do summer school is so that we have more flexibility in the school year. There's times that if I have to go for a board meeting, then I'm not panicked that we didn't get as much homeschool done because we did it during the school year. And then the last piece is it is give and take. I've said that I'm no longer consulting at the level I was because something had to give. When I decided to homeschool, I went down to one single board that I was on. I've since, now that I've gotten in the flow of homeschooling, I've picked up a few things here and there. But like there was definitely has been cuts in my life to make room for other things. And I think that's just a piece of the balancing act.
That makes a lot of sense. What went into the decision to homeschool for your family?
Yeah, there was a lot of decisions. I felt like I wanted my kids to explore things that were a little different than maybe like traditional schooling. That was just something like I was really being like called and felt the need for. I do travel a lot for work, and I've notoriously, if you follow me on social media, I notoriously bring my kids with me a lot of places they probably shouldn't be, but I dragged them along, and I didn't really want to give that up as they were getting older in school. The last year my daughter was in school was second grade, and I remember how many times I had to go to the teacher, ask for the schoolwork, and I just felt like I was disrupting like her flow, her class, and I was like, that's not fair for her to make my dreams like come true of having my kids with me. And so yeah, being able to have them travel with me. And then I think, other things, just my youngest actually has a genetic condition. And so we travel we have to go to a bigger city, obviously, for her doctor's appointments. That takes time away. And so there was just like a lot of little things that just kept kind of adding up to like this feeling like that was the right decision. And it's funny because if you knew me back when I wasn't a parent, but I would tell you how good of a parent I was to the point earlier, I would have said I would never have homeschooled ever. Even during COVID, I remember being like, what? I can't homeschool these kids. Like, this is insane. And then 2 years later, I voluntarily homeschooled. So I think that it depends on, where you're at in life and like what's being like pulled on your heartstrings. But now I really, really love it. My girls do too. I ask them every year whether we want to continue. This will be our third year. And it is like the quickest answer of, yeah, we want to keep homeschooling. And so they love it as much as me. And so I don't know, I think we found our groove, especially going into this third year. The first year there were a lot of tears, there was a lot of unschooling, probably more on my end than their end. Last year it was like,
Tears were yours as well as theirs, I'm guessing.
yeah, tears were definitely mine. I was like, I'm a terrible teacher, I'll never be able to teach them. And so yeah, now this year I'm like, okay, we've got it. I'm sure some other big life event will get thrown our way, but
Yeah. Something's coming down the line, but yeah, enjoy the moment. Enjoy the moment you're in.
I'm enjoying the thriving right where we're at right now. That phase, it will pass, and some will be in something new.
So, what is your favorite thing about raising kids on the farm and having a connection to agriculture?
Yeah, I mean, probably that's actually one of the reasons too with homeschooling is I feel like farm life is unlike anything else. If you grow up on it, if you're raising kids, you get it. Like it is just one of those things. I mean, like I've said, we live on the field. I grew up on the dairy. Like it is so immersed. It would be like if your dad was a banker and you lived at the bank, right? Like it's just
Maybe not as exciting, but some people love banking.
probably not as exciting, but I don't know. Breaking into the safe would be fun. Probably that'd be something fun if you were a banker's kid. But no, it is like it just is all immersive, and so I think to the point of even homeschooling, my husband leaves obviously at the crack of dawn in the morning. I remember when we our kids went to school, he didn't see them in the morning at all. He obviously didn't see them at lunch, and he didn't see them till he got in at whatever time at night, and it was like so little time, and so for me, like being able to homeschool and raise the girls on the farm, now, he comes home for lunches and it's this whole hour they get with him that they used to not get. And that, in the afternoons, if they're done with their homeschool lessons, they get to go to the dairy. And so I just think it's like such a cool experience to have that. Whether you homeschool or not, that is still there. We just feel like with homeschooling, we get even more of it, I guess. But yeah, I don't know another business that's like that, I guess, where your kids get to be a piece of it and be a part of it and get to see what you're doing. I think that's also a cool piece, is like the tangible aspect of farming. When we have beef in our freezer, like it's pretty cool to be able to say that's our cow, that we raised. And it may not be an Angus beef, it is definitely a dairy beef, but it tastes good too. So it's a fun, I don't know, it's just, I've already said it, but it's unlike anything else I think of a way to raise your kids.
I think too it can be such a great way for them to build confidence and to find their own interests. Watching my daughter went out with daddy last night to move cows, and she had a lot of thoughts when she came back in. But watching them develop as what they consider to be, valued members of the team and of the operation, and that they feel like they're helping. And I think it's cool as shit that our kids actually have some idea what their parents do, because, you know, for a lot of us who do work off farm, like our kids still don't know. But especially like for your kids getting to travel with you and see what you do, and getting to see on the farm what you actually do. How many kids are like, well, my mom works. Maybe they know where she works, but they probably don't know what she actually does. And that's a cool thing.
No, that's a really good point, because I mean, even for me, sometimes I feel like my kids are like, what did you and Natalie do today? Like talk on your computer? Like there is still a disconnect where for my kids with the farm, it's very tangible, like what my husband does and what our farm does and how, it adds value to our family. And actually last year, so I part of being on one of the dairy boards, I get to be a global dairy ambassador. And so I'll go over to Rome to FAO and do different meetings there, different presentations. And last year I brought my oldest daughter, and she got to see me speak. And I think that's the first time she's ever seen me give a speech. And very much it was like a moment for both of us that you could tell us, she was like, this is what you do. And I was like, this is what I do. And like very emotional, that I was just like, you get to see it. And whereas, yeah, growing up on the farm, it's all right there for you to see. And I do think that's a big value to kids, of, to your point, of like feeling a part of it. Like, I think that like one of the things that I have talked with other parents about, that, yeah, go to work like a 9 to 5. Again, all the child really sees is like them like leaving and going to a job that, sure, they know where they work, but yeah, not that understanding. Whereas like there's just something, I think, for kids that is more tangible with farming.
Well, I think too, going back to communicating with non-farmers, I think on some level, the more they see that our whole family is involved, and that, like you said, like if I put chemicals down on my land, it is going into my water supply, and that is the water that my children drink. And I think that does help clarify a lot for people, that it's very unlikely that we're just out there like, la la la, chemicals everywhere, horrible practices everywhere, because like I literally, that's the water my children bathe in. We have a shallow well. Like, I am invested. And I think, I try not to put pictures of my kids online, but I think just folks knowing that there is an actual child involved, and that, there's an actual family on that family farm, and that, we are making decisions for our family, and it is, in our home with what we're doing.
Yeah, the potato farmer I interviewed, he said something very similar, like actually about it was about, if he sprays, how long he has to stay out of the crops, and yada yada yada. And he was like, just last night I went out and picked potatoes, and my wife and I ate them for dinner. We brought some to my parents. Like, why would I do that if I thought for a second what I was doing was, bad or scary or wrong? And even like to the point of, the regulators coming out and being like a larger farm. I think there is this idea, the factory farm is like, a word everyone loves to use on the internet. And I think I've had regulators for sure come out that were like, oh, this is going to be a big farm. It's this factory farm word I've heard. And then I remember having them pull up to our house on the dairy that's like 100 steps from the barn, and then being, oh, you live here? And I was like, oh yeah, where else, like kind of where else do you think I live? And so like very much like that we have to have those connection points. I mean, I think if there's probably one takeaway from this podcast, I feel like we've talked about communication, like human connection point. Like it's so important for farming, and especially the further people get from rural America.
So not to bring it down from saying that like you're thriving in this moment, but what is we often ask people what they're struggling with in parenting these days, because it's the reality that we all, no matter what age and stage our kids are at or what age and stage we are at, that we are having struggles. So what are some of the things that you're struggling with these days?
Oh my gosh, don't laugh at me, you guys. My kids have always been terrible sleepers. I'll say that. Like I feel like kids just get a gene that says they sleep, or they get a gene that says they don't. And I'm just convinced, like I got two, they got the gene that don't sleep. And so my youngest, she's 8, so she's not like that young. For whatever reason, I swear we cannot get that little girl to sleep in her bed. So we currently, our family room is a makeshift bedroom. So she sleeps on the couch every single night. This goes to the point, like if you took a picture of my dog on the concrete, like I feel like you could take a picture of my kid on the couch and they'd be like, wow, these parents don't even have a bedroom for their kid. She sleeps on the couch every night. But it's the only place we can get her to sleep. And so it has been, it's been a struggle. Her sleeping is really struggling. So if anyone has any ideas of how to get an 8-year-old to sleep in their bedroom, I mean, we tried everything, like is the air conditioning too loud, white noise, nightlight, and she says she's not really afraid. She just says, I don't sleep good. And so, yeah, that's a parenting struggle that we currently have a child living in our family room. So.
Well, we did recently have a sleep therapist on, so I mean,
Oh, I'll have to listen to that.
specific advice is tricky, but she might have some tips. But I'm sure that there's a lot of the things that you've already tried too.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like at this point I've just given up, and I'm like, I think with parenting, if there's something I've learned,
As long as she sleeps somewhere.
yeah, like this too shall pass. Is actually that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that I got from my mom is this too shall pass. Like this feels like such a big deal in your life, but you will look back one day and it won't be a big deal. And I have a sister-in-law who's currently potty training, and she was asking me about potty training, and I was like, man, I don't even remember how old the kids were. I don't remember how long we did diapers at nighttime. Like, she's like, how do you not remember? And I was like, listen, I know, like you're in it right now, but it has been like 5 years since I've done that. And again, this too will pass. And then I was like, that's my advice is like, it feels like the biggest deal right now, but here in a couple of years, you'll be like, gosh, when did we do that? How did we do that? And it'll be totally done. And so I think that probably with the sleeping thing, I think that's the point I've got to is like not even really trying anything. Maybe in a month we'll try again, but for right now, just let it pass, I guess.
All right. So we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be?
Oh my gosh! At the county, does it have to be a real county fair award? Or
No, yeah, it can be made up. Yeah, you can make up whatever you want, but to make sure that you win.
Oh my gosh, talking. And it's funny because I swear if you got in trouble for talking in high school too much, like you should become a podcaster because like I feel that to my core. My dad tells the funniest stories of him like betting me $5 that I couldn't make it 30 minutes down the road without talking, just trying to get a moment of quiet. And he says it to this day. He's like, and now I get in my truck and I turn on your podcast and I get to listen to you talk more, even though you don't even live with me and I don't have to drive you places anymore. But no, definitely talking champ. You put me in a room with people, I will talk to them and I will figure out something to talk with them about.
So, Tara, true story. This year, my daughter's she just finished second grade. And I realized during a parent teacher conference, I had to have her teacher add it to her, quote unquote, permanent record that she was in speech therapy for like 3.5 years because she did not talk until she was well over 3. And her teacher didn't believe me because she literally talks in her sleep now.
Making up for lost time.
She saved up all those words from the first 3 years.
But I know she was having trouble with some like phonemic awareness or some damn thing. And I was like, oh, I bet it's probably because of her speech delay. And her teacher was like, are we talking about the same kid? I was like, oh yeah, Yeah, we are. Yeah, I ran into her speech therapist recently. I was like, I want my money back because you guys did too good of a job. And then she pointed out that, it's a state provided service, blah, blah, blah. We didn't actually pay for it. And I was like, yeah, well, maybe undo just a tiny fraction of it.
Yeah, or that pause button that Tara's dad was looking
Yeah.
for.
Maybe I can just start her podcasting now. Maybe.
There you go. Even if you tell her she's recording, no one has to know.
She'd have a hilarious podcast. We should let her.
So we'll go ahead and move into our cussing and discussing segment to round out the episode. If you are a listener and want to submit yours, you can go to our SpeakPipe or our email, and the links for those are in the show notes. Katie, what are you cussing and or discussing this week?
So I think this is kind of funny to me, at least based on Tara's just being like, everything will pass. I am so frustrated by this continual, like, feeling like I've finally gotten something of a system in place. I finally know what's going on. I've finally found a solution that works for us for anything in our lives, even like the smallest thing. And it's like the minute you start to feel good that this thing might actually improve the smallest possible fucking part of your life, it stops working. Or something else just completely explodes and like whatever tiny win you made with X.
Right, that thing is working, but everything else fell apart, so it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, like cool. So now our drill bits are organized, for example. But everything else has gone straight to hell. So there's that. Tara, what do you have to cuss and discuss this week?
Oh my gosh. So I mentioned I moved. I think I'm 5 months into my move. So you'd think we'd like have it figured out, but I have decided, like, I don't know how I set up my kitchen, but it is not working. Like, it is absolutely like it, you would think like I let my kids organize the kitchen based on how inefficiently it flows. And the worst part is one of the cabinets, I made the medicine cabinet. And my husband said, "That's a terrible spot for the medicine cabinet." And I was like, where do you want to put it? Like, I remember the argument about where you want to put it.
So now you have to double down and keep the medicine there forever?
I am tempted to do that, but I am so over the inefficiency of this kitchen and feeling like I'm like, I have to go here for the pans and I need to go to that drawer. Like, it doesn't make sense right now. So I will be moving the medicine cabinet. I don't know when. I told myself I'd have time this week, and it's quickly already Wednesday and 4th of July on Friday. So I'm thinking next Monday. I'm going to pencil. I think I'm going to put it in my calendar actually and be like, figure out the fucking kitchen, okay? And maybe the pantry while you're at it too. So that's my goal for next week, is to organize my kitchen so that I want to cook and be in my kitchen.
Isn't one of the things about homeschooling is that you can actually like get your kids to do stuff? Maybe they could each make up a plan for like the most efficient kitchen, and then you could pick one. Couldn't be worse.
Yeah, the next big project after this is going to be organizing our homeschool lives, because I always said I wasn't going to be the mom that had the homeschool all over the kitchen table, and we are, especially with the move, because I haven't figured out how I want it to flow yet. So that'll be like August project, back to school project, is girls, how do we want to organize our homeschool stuff?
Yeah. You bring me some ideas.
I do feel like that might be the only thing more frustrating than having a system that does work, at least momentarily, is feeling sure that the system will work. Especially, I feel like it's just multiplied by any time anyone else is like, I don't think this will work. I don't think this is a good idea. And you're like, I don't know anybody like this, but if that causes you to double down and be like, no, this is perfect. And then it doesn't fucking work. And you're just like, ugh. Arlene, what do you have to cuss and discuss today?
So mine is, I don't like to get too gendered typically, so forgive me for this one. Um, I'm dealing with, and I'm only saying it's male obliviousness because I happen to have, well, I have a daughter and then I've got 3 boys. So I'm talking about the tween boys in my life at the moment who are delightful people, but sometimes kind of oblivious to some things. So the one example that I have from just this week, you guys are celebrating 4th of July soon. We had Canada Day yesterday, and so we got someone to milk in the afternoon. So we had the afternoon off. We went to the lake where my mom has a cottage. And my kids are older. They range from 19 to 10. So I thought, like, we put on sunscreen frequently enough that this is going to be a thing that they know to do. We are outside all day. So it was late in the afternoon when I said to my 10-year-old, and I'm noticing his face is starting to get a bit red, "Did you put on sunscreen today?" And he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And all I did was I pointed at the sun. He was out on the dock fishing, and I just pointed at the sun, and I was like, I didn't think I had to. So, yeah, just some obliviousness. Another fun example was the other day. Now, I will partly blame myself because the smoke in the kitchen was my fault. The people who did not inform me that there was something burning in the kitchen was the fault of the people who were in the house at the time. I had taken something out of the freezer, threw it in the oven, turned it on, and didn't realize there was still a tray, sadly, a tray of cookies that didn't make it out of the oven. So double sad that the cookies then burnt. So they were in there while something frozen was cooking, and I was outside doing some other things. Watched one of my teenagers go to the barn to go clean, do his, afternoon chores. And eventually my husband came into the house and he was like, "Something's burning." And then later I said to my teenager, "Did you not smell something?" Or I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't know what it was." So don't research.
Didn't need to find out either. Didn't know what it was. Not my problem.
Yeah, that smells weird, but I gotta go to do chores. So I mean, good that he attended to his barn chores, but maybe just mention it to the individual who's outside, weeding the flower beds. Something smells weird inside. I don't think it's supper. Or if it is supper, I don't think we want to eat it because it's burning.
I feel like it's a pretty solid and valid life lesson that I feel like fairly universally, if you smell smoke or like rotten eggs or any weird chemical smell and you don't know what it's from, you should find out what it's from.
Yeah, say something, do something. We should work on that in our
Yeah, I feel like it's a solid expectation in life.
Yeah, exactly. When the smoke alarm goes off, that doesn't need to be the time that we deal with it. So we want to thank you so much, Tara, for joining us today. Just remind our listeners where they can find you and your podcast online.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was such a great chat. Great way to start my Wednesday. If you're listening to this, you might be a podcast person, so we would love to have you jump over to Discover Ag when you finish this one and give us a listen as well. So Discover Ag on all the major platforms, and then you can follow us on social media as well. I'm at Tara Vander Dussen, or our Instagram page for the podcast is at Discover Ag Podcast.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Tara.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.